We aren't able. Oh, okay. Belated recording in progress. Thank you, Beth. The grants cannot support general operations, organizational development, or capital improvements. Of course, you can pay up to 10% of your award towards overhead. So keep that in mind as you're filling out your budget. We also don't, for this program, find that fellowships or artist residencies are a particularly strong fit, given our emphasis on public-facing programming and youth-facing programming. So those are kind of on the no list. Also, because these funds are federal, advocacy and activism are generally not allowed or appropriate here. And in this case, we define that as activities to advance a specific policy or a specific partisan agenda. I know this can get a little complicated given the often political and civic nature of these programs. So if you have any questions about whether your program is veering into advocacy, just send me a note. I'm sure we can figure it out. As I mentioned, it's okay to have curriculum building or curriculum sharing part of your grant activities. Like I mentioned, the American Music History course did this beautifully. However, it shouldn't be the only part of your project. So that is one restriction we're putting out. Another restriction we're putting out this year is we are not able to, unfortunately, support 8th grade field trips to Washington, D.C., Model UN, or other forms of pre-canned curriculum. So if you are kind of a national program that's hoping to roll out regionally, in most cases, we may not be the strongest fit for supporting your work. But if you have any questions about that, please let me know. And I would love to hear from you if you're falling into this category so that we don't rule you out, preliminarily if there is some room for it to work. Okay, and then fundraising and marketing are also activities we can't quite follow. On to questions.
Thanks, Kirsten. The first one I'll bring up is, can the project manager also be the humanities advisor? The answer is technically yes, but we would really like you to implement a project team that has, ideas from different places, right? So we do feel that having a separate person fill a humanities advisor role would be most ideal to your project. So yes, you can technically do it, but we'd like to see other people involved. Let's see, another question is, if we received the California Humanities Grant in 2023, may we apply for a 2024 grant? Now, this is a very nuanced question. The blanket answer is, in most cases, you need to finish and close your existing active grant before you can have another one. So you may have a grant that ends at the end of this calendar year, which is great. End that grant. Go ahead and start on working on this application now, because these won't be finalized until late winter. So the timing will work out on that. But if you have very specific eligibility questions in your situation, you can email me directly. But our baseline policy is that you as a project director and also an organization itself may only have one pending application in with us at a time, or have one active grant open with us at a time.
Yes, yes. And I'll add that what I've been telling the current cohort of Civics and Humanities grantees, if you want to apply again this year, you may do so long as your final report is submitted by February 1. So I know they're part of the design for this program, as you all can imagine, is that the planning grantees would eventually move on to become implementation grantees. So we could support the full life cycle of the program. So if that's you, February 1 is the goal date. Thanks.
Let's see, and kind of on the same line of eligibility, Alex asks if you can apply for a Civics and Humanities grant as well as a Humanities for All. No, absolutely not. Simple answer. Not one you want to hear, but simple answer.
Not this time, but if you're declined for either, you can come back and reapply.
Next, can you apply for both planning and implementation at the same time? No, you need to choose one that fits your situation best.
Yes, thank you. That is a good question.
Let's see, Kara asks, if the residency culminates in a project carried out by the students with the artist or culture bearer, does that work?
Potentially. I think it would really depend on the kinds of activities you have in store to engage the students with the culture bearer. And I think about the distribution of your budget. Kara, this is an interesting question. Maybe you could send me a note. I would love to chat a little bit more, find out what you're doing.
All right, and this will be the last one right here. Are art educators considered culture barriers and therefore count as a humanities advisor?
Yeah, absolutely. Art educators would be, I think, a strong culture bearer for projects like these. And the thing with culture bearers, the thing with humanities advisors, you guys, is make sure that the subject matter expertise you're bringing on is the subject matter expertise you need. So if you're going to be doing a project about Dust Bowl migration in California, we'd really love to see an expert on American history, Dust Bowl migration, right? So the subject matter should align. It's not so important what the job title of the person does, who's doing the work is, if that makes sense.
Kirsten and Brett, there's actually another question in the chat from Gladys, if you want to take a look at that as well.
Oh, thanks for flagging that, Beth. Yeah, I see. Okay, question. We work primarily with the indigenous from Mexico, Mixtecos, Triquis, Zapoteco, and others that reside in the Central Valley. Is that one of the groups we can apply for? Yeah, absolutely. Definitely. That sounds like a great fit. And if you have any more questions, Gladys, please feel free to send me an email. I will put that in the chat. Okay. Well, we're going to move on with our slide deck for now, but we'll have a couple other question breaks coming up. So thank you guys. These are really, really great questions.
All righty. So now we're going to get into some more technical details. So let's start off on how to apply. The very, very top snippet of this slide is actually the very top ribbon of our webpage. So you can use that link to the grant portal that's circled to get into the grant portal. Now, these are the things that are required. You'll need to fill on an online application form. You'll need to upload a project or a proposal narrative. We'll go over that in detail. You'll need to submit a very simple budget along with a short narrative that goes along with it. And then you'll need certification from someone at your organization or from your fiscal sponsor if you're using one that just says, yes, all the information I'm submitting is true and accurate and complete. There is an opportunity for you to submit more support materials. There's in the guidelines, you can find what those examples are. And if you are fiscally sponsored, we'll ask for you to upload your memo of understanding or your fiscal sponsorship contract. So who can apply? We accept applications from nonprofits, local or state government entities such as schools, museums, universities, libraries, tribal governments. So you either have to have a tax-exempt org status of 501c3 within the state of California, or be a municipal entity within the state of California. Individuals, if you're an individual artist, let's say, then you can't apply as an individual. Only organizations can apply to California Humanities. So if you're an individual artist, you will need to find a fiscal sponsor, any 501c3 or any organization that specializes in fiscal sponsorships so that they can apply on your behalf. As we said already, applicants should not have a pending application in with us or an active grant, and all project directors must have a current good standing with California Humanities. Some key dates, and these are right at the top of your guidelines too for your reference. The application is online and open right now. You can start right away. They're due 5 o'clock on February 1st. You will receive a notification from us whether you have been accepted or denied the last week of March. The grant period starts on April 1st, and then we will have an orientation for those who have been awarded on May 2nd. So, like I said before, our webpage, calhum.org, takes you into the grant portal. It's going to bring you to a login page. If you have applied with us before, use that same username and password that you have used before. If you are new to us, just click the register button to set that up. You'll be taken to like a main menu of all of our programs. And so you can find the specific program that you're interested in applying to. In this case, probably the CNH, either implementation or planning. You can hit that green More button on the program that you're referring to take you into a brand new application. So this is kind of a sample of what an application may look like. It's going to show you these tasks in the middle. You can see right now these tasks have a little half-filled green circle. That means they've been started but have not been finished. So these tasks are going to accumulate in the middle. There may be different number of tasks for different people depending on what your situation is, i.e. if you are using a fiscal sponsor or not. You'll just click on those individual tasks and kind of complete them as they come up. So this is just an example of any old web form that you find online. It's going to be a little fill in the blank, drop down boxes, check boxes, put in your address and your phone number and your email, that kind of thing. And then at the bottom of the form, you will see this green mark as complete. So at the end of each task, you will see that green mark as complete button. So that's how you will tell the system that you're done with that specific task. That does not submit your application. It just closes this one particular task that you're on, and then you'll go to the next one. This is an example of what if it asks you for an upload. For instance, you'll need to upload a proposal narrative, and if you are using a fiscal sponsor, you will need to upload your contract. If you want to upload your supplemental materials, this is just like attaching anything to like a web-based email. You hit attach, you browse out to your computer, you pick the file you want, and you hit upload. Again, there's a mark as complete button when you're done with that. So you can see in this little example, I've completed the first couple of tasks. Those green check boxes light up to let you know those are done, and the ones that still have open circles have not yet been completed. Notice the last one at the bottom, certification form, says cannot be started at this time. So certain tasks are subsequent. You have to complete them in the specific order. So just note that. The other thing, the orange circle on this page is the add a collaborator button. So if you need to ask someone to help you, if you need to have your fiscal sponsor sign at the bottom, this is where you can invite somebody else's email address to join you in helping you fill out some of the information in these tasks or make one of the uploads or sign the certification at the end. So once in this example, I'm just showing you that all these 3 check boxes are filled in. So you're pretty much done and ready to submit. That orange circle is drawing your attention to the preview button, which allows you to download a copy of all the materials for your own reference. This isn't needed. This is just a question that people often ask, so I'm including it here. You can hit that preview button to kind of download your own copy of everything that you've put into this application. Another common question I get is I've finished my task and I've marked it as complete, but I need to go in and edit something. I need to fix something. I need to change a phone number, an email, whatever it is. And the edit button is a little hard to find. So you'll see I'm opening this task and you'll see those 3 little dots in the upper right-hand corner. You're going to click those dots and then find where the edit button is. All right. So this, again, this example shows you that all of the required tasks are completed. All these check boxes are filled in, and that submit button has lit up green. So that means you're ready to hit that submit button. So upon submitting that, you will definitely receive an email confirmation. Sometimes those do go to junk spam, but you will get an auto reply saying, yes, your application has been received. A couple of tips on this: get started as soon as possible. Don't wait to the last minute, because you're bound to have some sort of hiccup. We're glad to help you along the way if you do have any tech support issues, but just try not to wait to the last day, because we're busy that day. You can imagine all the people calling asking for help at the last minute. Make sure that you really, really read the guidelines documents to know especially what to include in your narrative, all the different kinds of information that we're asking you. Make sure that all those required tasks are marked as complete, so that you can go ahead and hit that submit button. And one other thing to note is only the person who initiates the application is the one who will have that submit button. Sometimes that throws people off at the very end. All right, so I don't see anything in the QA at the moment. I don't see anything in the chat.
Okay, well, maybe we can just keep rolling along for now. We'll do another question break at the end, but thank you, Brett, for walking us through the technical side of things. I know there are a lot of questions that come up when people get inside the application, so that's super helpful. I also had a minute to look through the chat, and I wanted to thank everyone for introducing yourselves. It's great to be joined by, seems like, folks from every corner of the state today, so thank you. It's so nice to be here all together. Next, I just want to walk you through the part of the application that is sort of the heart and soul of your application. This is the narrative proposal. This is the chance for you to introduce your project, your youth groups, your staff to the grant reviewers at California Humanities. Your application will be read by external peer reviewers from the civics education field. And they'll be wanting to know basically 7 different prompts and questions that can help us get to know you better. These are short answer questions that are about 200 or 250 words each. So space is tight, I will say that, and we're asking for a lot of information. So thank you in advance for taking time to introduce yourselves to us using these prompts. Okay, some tips for doing the narrative. Firstly, make sure to follow the instructions in the guidelines. We give a lot of great information there, and I know Beth, thank you, has just put a link in the chat to our guidelines and FAQs, so start there. Formatting is important with these documents. Reviewers are reading a lot of applications at once, and it's easiest to process the information if you use topic headings. So keep the topic headings, but don't repeat the prompting questions in your document. You can create either a Google Doc or a Word doc and then upload it as a PDF to our grant portal. So you can, as Brett mentioned, the application is live. You can get started today. You could open up an application and come back and edit it as much as you want. Same with your narrative prompt. You can kind of work out of a Google Doc or a Word doc and then upload it later. We like to say 1-inch margins and 11-point typeface for those of you who were wondering about that. And then just be careful with the word count. We really appreciate your work to fit into these word count prompts. Okay, so now I'm just going to walk you through the questions that you'll be asked in your narrative. Number 1 is project purpose, right? Why does this project matter? To whom does it matter? Where are you and what are you doing? What kind of humanities and civics learning is going to take place as a result of your work? Any connections you can draw between what you're doing and the intention of our Civics and Humanities program will really help reviewers connect the dots. If you're a project who's already gotten started, piloted, tested, or run some model of your program with youth, please make sure to utilize the additional 100 word count option to tell us about the outcomes of your project if you've already started it. What goals might you adjust, change, or create in this next iteration? Where do you see yourself going in the future? Next, it's time for us to meet you and your project team. Please give us bios of the project director who will be leading and executing the project, as well as your humanities advisors, at least one, but you can have multiple, really as many as are involved. We'd love to know their subject matter expertise. It's also really important here to tell us any direct engagement you've had with youth. And you do not need to be, everyone on your team does not need to be, a long-standing youth educator, though I think someone on the team should have that kind of experience. But let us know your contact with youth, let us know your contact with civics, and just kind of a précis of your professional career and organization. Middle grades is its own audience, as I'm sure I'm telling the choir here. So let us know if you've worked with middle grades in particular. And in this space, we also would love to hear about your educational philosophy and your values. So we have another section where you can get into your equity approach with students, but that's the sort of philosophy we're gesturing at here. Okay, now the next section, questions 3 and 4 and 4B, are really all about your youth audience. Who are the young people who will participate in your program? What are their lives like? What issues and challenges are they facing? How do you know this? What's your contact with them? These are the kinds of questions we're wondering about here. How are you planning to engage the youth authentically in questions and experiences that matter to them? And how do you know that they matter? We also would love to know about any equity approach you might have, whether you are offering, financial barrier assistance like scholarships, or if you're intentionally developing the audience for your programs from underserved and underrepresented groups. That's something to talk about here. If you're working with immigrants or other groups who are still orienting themselves to what it means to participate in American society or in their own societies, talk about that here. The engagement strategy piece, I will say, is really important for the review purposes. We really value student-centered design with this program. The research we've conducted tells us that students are engaged right to their highest potential when they're involved in the design process. So if this is something you've been thinking about in your work, please let us know in this section. The community connection section is also a great place to expand on any partnerships you might have in the works or perspective on your application. An outreach partner or someone who might be helping you host your program, the public library, a community center, or other youth groups that you're involved in, let us know. Okay, and then these are the last few questions in the application. Number 7 deals with the civics and humanities approach. If you could please talk a little bit about your philosophy of civics. As I mentioned at the beginning of this call, I know civics comes with a lot of maybe academic connotations that can be a little misty, a little hard to decode. Let us know how you think of civics. Do you think of civics as walking around your neighborhood and saying hi to your neighbors? Is that the kind of ethos you're going to be working into your students? Do you want to explore a civics that's more about government structures and voting? There are so many ways to engage civics, and we really do validate a broad spectrum of civics definitions, and we're just curious how you're seeing civics work from your perspective. This is a space also to talk about how your humanities advisors will help you engage with civics. Next, the goals and impact section. This is a 150-word section where we would like you to state as directly as possible your goals for this project. What impact are you hoping to have on the youth that you serve? And if you're a planning grantee, what impact do you see coming out of your project potentially? Next, and this fundraising strategy question is not on the planning grant because we know you're in the early stage, but if you're applying for implementation and you realize that you'll be needing funds beyond your one-to-one match and beyond the grant, please describe your strategy for raising these funds. This should also align with your budget, which will give us a full financial picture of your project. Okay, and then the last piece that we're going to ask you to fill in for us is a project timeline. Can you please break down 12 months of activities for planning grantees or 18 months of activities for implementation grantees? the meetings, events, and activities that will be most core to your project, when they'll happen, and who's involved. As I mentioned at the beginning of the call, Brett, who is a wonderful wizard of technology, has just redone our proposal budget. So it used to be an Excel upload, and now it's embedded in the application. So in the embedded budget form, we would really like to see the full picture of your project budget, all the funds that your organization is putting towards this project, as well as the match. You can just begin to document it here, and things might change later, but a sense of how you're going to make your match without federal funds. Again, because that's a stipulation from the NEH that we don't have control over that piece. Here's what the budget form looks like now, very sleek. And then I really want to encourage all of you to make use of the budget narrative section. Please, if you can, break down things like salaries, the types of materials that you'll be purchasing for the program, administrative overhead, subscriptions, your core expenses. If you could just give us a little short paragraph on some of these numbers and how you're breaking them down, that will really help the reviewers get an idea of how you're valuing certain aspects of your project budget. Okay, pretty much anything you might need to pay for in the course of a project is eligible under our guidelines. This can include salaries, benefits, honoraria, and stipends. Like I said, not just for adults, but for youth. Any community members who are serving as an advisory role on your project should be compensated fairly for their time. So sometimes I get questions from people who are like, can I pay youth? And yes, absolutely. Please pay anyone whose time is being used on your project. Supplies, materials, again, excluding alcoholic beverages. You can also hire staff who can make your event more accessible. So we've seen translators hired to work in different languages. I know in the chat we have some folks working with Indigenous groups and Indigenous Mexican groups. So translators, both live and written, are absolutely appropriate here, as well as event photography. You know, we love a high quality event photo too, and we know that's one of the last things we think about when we're doing our programs. So we have a full list of things you can expense in the FAQ, and of course you can always reach out to me or Brett if you have questions. Brett, do you want to pop on screen for the MOU?
Sure, yes, like I said, if you are an organization that does not have 501c3 status, or if you are an individual humanities practitioner, you will need to use a fiscal sponsor, a 501c3 organization, to apply on your behalf. So that organization, the fiscal sponsor, is technically the applicant, and then you would be the subrecipient. So if that is your case, the application asks you a few questions in that regard, and then it will ask you to attach the agreement that you have with that organization.
Excellent. Thank you, Brett. Okay, and then there's also an option on these applications to include support materials. These are not required, they're completely optional, but they do strengthen your application. And if you have the time and bandwidth, I think it's worth your while to do things like collect letters of support from your humanities advisor, other members of your project team, any other organizations you might be partnering with on your project. If you can put together, a little PDF of photos and testimonies or flyers and graphics from programs you've done in the past, that can establish your track record of youth and civics programming. I think that's a really strong addition. What we ask you to do when you've selected your support material, if you'll be using them, again, they are optional. You can put them into a single PDF and label them support materials and upload them into the grant portal. 5 pages is the max. I think we have our external reviewers spend about 10 minutes with this section if you choose to use it. So we ask for a 5-page limit for that reason. Okay, we're winding down here, and we'll take some more questions as we wrap at noon. But first, I just wanted to give you all some sense of what to expect after you hit that green submit button. So what will happen once you give us your application is we will put it through a thorough and rigorous review with peers in your field, people who know what it takes to work with middle grade students and get public and civics projects off the ground. I'll read them, our CEO and president will read them, and then we'll come together for a multi-stage review process, including a review panel, and then we'll be able to share our decisions with you by the end of March 2024. If you are awarded a grant, you will have your grant period start the first week of April, and the first funds installment will also come with your grant agreement. If you are not awarded a grant this time, we always encourage you to apply for future California Humanities grants. Many times we see applications that do not make their first application turn into a grant, come back and find that they're awarded for a subsequent application. So please keep applying. We hope to stay connected. Also, if you'd like to hear what the reviewers had to say about your application and get recommendations for strengthening it in the future, you can write to me and ask for your reviewer comments, and Brett and I will share those with you. The disbursement of funds is something we'll talk about at the grant orientation webinar, but essentially you get a piece of it with your first grant agreement, and then you get another piece at your interim report for implementation, and then the final 10% at the completion of your final report. The orientation session will be scheduled in May, depending on the schedules of everyone involved, so just keep that bookmarked. And we'll also ask you to do a few things to acknowledge our grant support, such as including a one-sentence acknowledgement of our support on any public-facing materials and keeping us informed of your projects, because whenever it's appropriate, we love to attend, show up, support you, meet you, get to know your work so we can share it back with our community. And we've highlighted a number of civics projects in our e-newsletter and blog, which goes around to a mailing list of about 12,000 folks in the state. So we would love to stay in touch with your project activities. Okay, in closing, I just want to share a few tips to help you create a proposal that will really stand out to reviewers. Make sure that civics are central to your project, not tangential. Be realistic with your project and with your budget, but keep it realistic because we'll be looking at the budget and timeline closely to think if your work seems feasible in the time and funding scheme that you've laid out. Think about realistic goals. We, as I mentioned, really support investment in community, investment in audience. So through your budget and proposal, take care to tell us everything you know about your audience and your connection to the youth you're working with. Yeah, project bios, take care with those. It's really important to introduce yourself and your project team extensively. Use the support materials where you can. And lastly, be complete and be consistent. We look at your application holistically, so your budget and your narrative should speak to each other and tell the story of what it is you're trying to do. Okay, I think I'll stop my monologuing there, but I really want to encourage all of you to send us an email, give us a call. If you have any questions, if you would just like to pitch your project and see if we think it's a good fit, the door is very much open and we would love to hear from you. And also, if you have reservations about applying for this program, please really feel welcome in this space. We want to see applications from a broad range of California stories, different backgrounds, ethnicities, racial, economic, geographic stories. We're really looking to support a broad range of California civics here. Okay, any questions?
Yeah, we have perfect timing, so we have got 5 minutes left. We'll address some questions. We can probably stay over a few more minutes if there are more. If things get too complicated or too in-depth, we'll ask that you email us. So Christina asks, what if I am both the project director, but I'm also the executive director of the nonprofit? How would I go about applying? Christina, that is a completely normal, general run-of-the-mill question. When you get into the application form, it will be 100% clear. There's one page of questions that's specifically for the organization itself. And then there's another page of questions that's for the project director that would be you. So as soon as you get into the application form, it will become crystal clear.
Yes, that is something we see all the time, Christina, and also that is superhero status in the nonprofit world. So
Someone asks, will the organization that is the subrecipient be able to apply and then have it signed by the fiscal sponsor? It's too much work for the fiscal sponsor to do all. Absolutely. This is what happens every day. That again is a very normal situation. The subrecipient fills out all the application form stuff, and you use that add collaborator button to add your authorizing official, your fiscal sponsor, into your application so that they can sign at the very end. After that fiscal sponsor signs, then you again can hit that submit button. But again, that's the situation happens every single day. All right, Prinsen asks, what is the project location mandate? So for example, should this project only be implemented in California?
that's a really great question. So as Brett mentioned, you must be based in California. The organization applying must be based in California and must have, I would say, like a core, your program should have a core relationship to California. I would not say that California needs to be the only place where your projects take place, but California is the only place where we can fund your project activities. So for instance, last year we supported a project from a group that interprets the life of Anne Frank in terms of hate crimes and violence in America today. They have offices and projects all over the country, but what we funded was the rollout of that exhibit in Spanish in Los Angeles public schools. So if you're a national program, all we ask is that you have a strong community connection in California and a California office. Hope that answers it.
Right, and I'll even to go further in that respect, if you are a nationwide 501c3, yes, you have to have a physical office in the state of California, and that physical office must be registered with the state of California Secretary of State. Now, that kind of minutia is very rare. Does that come up? So it may not apply to any of you, but technically, that's our policy.
Yeah. It's also occurring to me that I didn't mention, and I really should, another youth grant that we have at California Humanities. Some of you might be eligible for this. It's called NextGen. Beth, I wonder if you could look up a link to NextGen and pop it in the chat. Just quickly want to plug this program for all of you who are working with media training for youth 18 and under, middle school, high school. These grants are $15,000 grants for training the next generation of documentary filmmakers in California. Take a look at those grants too. Okay, Deanna is asking, can you support online programming? Yeah, definitely. Definitely you can support online virtual programming. We do support that. Just probably going to be important for those applications to demonstrate that you have a built-in youth audience that you can count on to engage in those programs. Yeah. Okay, last question I see is from Edwin, and it's a three-parter. Part one, are the application questions weighted differently? How are they scored in the review process? Well, that's a great question. I believe it's a three-part scoring system. So those slides that I showed you that broke down kind of the who you are, who your audience is, and what the future of your project is. Those are the three buckets. They're all weighted evenly. And your score will be kind of a single number at the end of that weighting process. So I would think to say evenly weighted. Brett, does that seem fair to you?
Yep.
In regards to hiring or paying youth, how does CalHum define fair pay for them? And how are youth assured they're not being exploited for their labor? Yeah, that is a sensitive question. One resource I would direct you to is the Intersection for the Arts nonprofit volunteer calculator. Every year they offer a wage that they think is fair for volunteer time. Maybe you could start with that. For 2023, I believe it's $33 an hour is what they think is a fair hourly wage for volunteers in California. So I think that might be a reasonable place to begin, but really up to you. You know your community, you know what would be fair for them and their time. Also making things voluntary, right? I think is an important way to get participation that is authentic and not exploitative. Okay. Lastly, what is the CalHum reporting process for in-kind services and goods towards a match? Reporting might even be a strong word for it. What we ask you to do is record. I'm going to replace it with record. If you can record your in-kind match in your budget. For implementation grantees, we ask you to share those numeric details at your interim and final report. And then for planning grantees, just once when you apply, and then again at your final report. So
we're not asking for receipts or anything. We're just asking for totals.
yeah, no receipts.
We're trusting you to provide us with accurate information.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. It looks like it's getting quiet here. So I just want to thank you all so much for your time, your attention, your interest. We're grateful for you being here today. And I want to thank my wonderful colleagues, Brett and Beth, for all their help on the webinar. And more soon. And I hope everyone has good holidays, and we'll be in touch before the Feb 1 deadline. Thank you.
Thank you.